Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar in our Net Zero Live couple of days of events. So we have here a Construct Zero session, and I have a brilliant panel for you today. So let's just explain what will happen over the next hour. We're going to hear from Stuart Young, who is Head of Stakeholder Engagement and Management at the Government Department of BEIS and their construction unit. He's going to talk about BEIS's work on net zero. He'll also provide an overview of the Construct Zero initiative and recent developments around that, including the Construction Leadership Council's session at COP26 last week, which, if you missed it, was quite a highlight for the construction industry. So I'm sure Stuart will explain a bit more about that. Also, on the back of that, there was a quarterly progress update, which was published last week. So Stuart will speak to that as well. We also have Catriona Duncan, and she is also from BEIS, and she will provide an overview of the business champions and partners and who's joined the programme most recently. Then you'll hear from our 4 business champions. We've got BAM UK, Reds 10, J Murphy and Sons, and Fork Truck Solutions. They will tell us about why they joined the initiative and the Construct Zero priorities that are most important to their company and why. Finally, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So I do encourage you, the listeners, to post any questions as you're listening to their presentations. If issues, topics, questions come up, do post them on the chat. I'll be keeping a lookout for those, and then I'll do a roundup at the very end. So post them while we're talking, and we will get to those before we finish. So with all of that said, I think I will pass over to Stuart now, who will tell you a bit more about Construct Zero. So over to you, Stuart. Oh, Stuart, I think you might be on mute. One second. Just trying to get Stuart's sound here.
Sorry, I've lost the. So I couldn't get back onto the screen. There was a problem with my IT for some reason. So morning, everyone. I hope. Great. So morning, everyone. I hope you're hearing me. Sorry about it. I had some IT problems. I'm working off a personal laptop at the moment, not my normal government laptop. So apologies about that. So morning, everyone, and I hope you're all well. As introduced, I head up the stakeholder engagement and management function for the BEIS construction team. But I also oversee the communications for the Construction Leadership Council's Construct Zero programme. And as just mentioned there, we recently presented a session at COP, which I'll go into in a few minutes. So can I just have the next slide, please? So really, this just talks about what the aim of Construct Zero is. So this is not about, we're not trying to develop any new solutions. We're not trying to kind of bring anything new. This is more about kind of collecting what's already there, amplifying and shining a light on existing programs, initiatives already in the sector, recognising a lot of great stuff is already happening. And as Catriona will talk about later, and we'll hear from some of our business champions as well about the great work that is going on. Next slide, please. So really, just to give you a bit of background on how kind of Construct Zero came about. So the Prime Minister published his 10-point Green Industrial Plan at the end of last year, and the Construction Leadership Council, which is a joint BEIS/sector council, came together and decided to produce Construct Zero, which basically is the construction sector's response to the challenge of net zero. Now, the programme is jointly led by myself and Hannah Vickers, who is the Chief of Staff at MACE. And underneath that, you can see on this slide here, there is a series of kind of groups, the main one of which is the Programme Board, and that provides a kind of oversight of the programme's delivery across the performance framework and engagement. And there are other groups, as you can see there on the slide. I'm not going to go through all of those, but we'll also circulate these slides after the session. Next slide, please. So really, what's Construct Zero about? So it's underpinned by 9 priorities across the themes of transport, buildings and construction activity. So these 9 priorities were pulled from the Committee for Climate Change report and were recognised as the 9 areas where we could have most impact in accelerating the sector's drive to net zero. As you'll see, when we talk to business champions later, not all of them will have an interest in all 9, and that is fine. The 9 as a collective represent a good set against which we can take forward the work of the programme. Next slide, please. So the performance framework, as just mentioned earlier, so back in July, we published the Construct Zero's performance framework, and that was developed to provide the CLC with a sector level dashboard on our progress towards net zero. So what the intention was back in July was to collect data for that on a quarterly basis, although recognising that not every metric will be available on a quarterly basis. So some of you on the call will hopefully have seen that last week we published the first quarterly progress report, and that set out against the 27-28 metrics about where there had been progress and where we were still awaiting for data, and where that will be coming on stream in the next version of the report, which will be in the spring. So we had a lot of good feedback on that report. It's been well engaged across the sector and beyond. So that is going to be a quarterly process which we will be reporting in, the CLC will be reporting into government on, and will be published quarterly. So across the Construct Zero programme will be a core deliverable for the Construction Leadership Council in 2022. So across the 12-month period, all those metrics will have a measurement against them, but some of them may take a bit longer given they're either not quite ready or they're only being measured on an annual basis rather than quarterly. But it does provide us with a starting point. I think, as some of you may have heard Andy Mitchell talk about last week, we could have sat there and refined and redeveloped this for another year, but it provides a starting point and for discussion. Next slide, please. So communication events, this is just a headline here of the events that we've either had or got coming up in the future. As you can see, obviously last week we delivered a sold out session at COP. That was in the green zone, and we had about 350 in the room, about 400 online, and I think just over 4,000 people have since viewed it on YouTube. Very successful session. We had a range of business champions and partners at the session talking about the challenges to net zero, what are the key opportunities coming up for the sector, and what the industry might be looking for from government going forward, recognising that obviously there's a number of strategies that have recently been published, including the heat and building strategy and the net zero strategy. What I would say here is that this is kind of the headlines, the events. So Katrina will talk about business champions shortly, but if you've got any events coming up, particularly for business champions, whereby you would like us to promote across our social media channels and to potentially look at providing speakers, do get in touch with myself or Katrina. Next slide, please. So I'll hand over there now to Katrina to talk us through a bit more about the business champions.
Thanks, Stuart. Hi, everybody. As Stuart said, my name is Katrina. I work alongside Stuart dealing with business champions. So as you can see on this slide, there are over 50 business champions. In fact, we have 54 to date. Some of them are SMEs like Adair and Cast. And on the other slide, there'll be some more. So can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So there's also Peak and Pallet Loop, who are SMEs, but across both of those slides, there are a range of construction companies, regardless of size, who have become business champions since we started in March. Next slide, please. In terms of the partners, again, we've got 65 to date, and these make up a large number of our CLC task force, but also a range of companies that aren't on our task force, like the finishes and interior sector and the I3P. Next slide, please. And obviously some companies there like UKRI and Imperial College London, they are not construction companies, but they partner with us because they believe in the value of Construct Zero. But what is a business champion? If I can have the next slide, please. So Business Champion is a company whose work in the net zero space aligns with one or more of the Construct Zero priorities. I won't read all of that, but essentially we're looking for companies who can provide evidence on the ground as to what they're doing and what the priorities are that align with their companies, and we'll hear from our business champions later. A partner is a company who is supportive of Construct Zero, and we just ask for their logo. So we're not asking for evidence, but we're asking for their support. So both of those will have their logo featured on the Construct Zero website. Again, we'll share these slides later. What is the benefit of being a business champion? Well, I will leave I'll leave the 4 business champions to tell them why you're here today, but I'll leave it there for now. Back to you, Chloe. Thank you.
Rookie error there, my mic off. Thank you so much, Catriona, that was brilliant. Thank you for the recap. I just had one quick question for you, Stuart. I know you mentioned the quarterly report. Obviously, it being the first one, if people were to go to it, how much actual information is there in that quarterly one? Because it's just the start. So is it more just laying the foundations, or can we already see a trend from that?
You can already see a trend for that in progress. So of the 27-28 metrics, there's already a number of them which we're starting to make progress on, and that is set out in the report, illustrated quite clearly. So there is a lot of progress that's already been made since we started the report in March. But what I would say is, and we've been clear on this going forward, is there's a lot more that needs to happen, and we need to kind of accelerate the pace of that going forward. But there's certainly, we are, when you look at the report, you can see there's certainly a lot of progress and a lot of good work already taking place.
Would you say there's a particular area that looks positive?
I think in general it looks quite positive. I wouldn't say any particular areas are kind of more positive than others. I think in general, I think what I would say is the report sort of signifies there's a lot of positive progress. But what I would say as well, just building on what Catriona just mentioned, we've seen an incredible amount of engagement on the programme across and beyond the sector. So just an example, I was on a call yesterday with a lot of US companies who are interested in Construct Zero. We've got Amazon interested, we've got Google interested, we've also got NatWest. There's a lot of companies across and outside of the construction sector who are really interested in what this programme is about, what it's looking to achieve, and what it is already achieving. So I think what will happen is we'll see over the kind of the next sort of iterative series of progress reports, is we'll really start to see the other metrics come on stream, start to be much more kind of higher traction deliverables. But if colleagues want to go on the report that's on the website now, they'll see there's certainly been a good start made.
That's great, and it's really encouraging to hear that some big name clients who will have obviously large scale construction projects in mind are wanting to get on board and interested to find out how the industry is changing. Okay, well, with that said, I think we're going to go over now to the business champions themselves. We're going to start with Matt Bennion from Reds 10, and I will just invite the rest of the team just to turn their mics and webcams off for this session, just so that Matt can have the floor. And just a quick reminder as well to our listeners, please post questions as you're listening if something pops into your mind and you want an answer to it by the end. Thanks very much. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you. And good morning to everybody. So yeah, Reds 10 recently appointed Construct Zero Business Champion, and I thought just start with really why the importance of net zero to Reds 10. We're a purpose-led organisation. We're all about helping everybody live, learn and thrive in amazing spaces, and you know, people will only live and thrive if our environment continues to thrive. And so we do view ourselves as responsible custodians of the environment that we live in, And our commitment, and one of the reasons for wanting to be a business partner, is that we'll do everything that we can to minimise our direct and indirect carbon footprint. So a little bit about REDS 10 and Construct Zero. As a specialist modular contractor, we're a full turnkey design and build, but using that offsite technology. We do have the rather unique position of being able to influence design, build, and operation of low and zero carbon buildings. And with that in mind, a couple of years ago, we actually set ourselves a better than carbon neutral at zero cost initiative. And what we're really trying to set out there is ways of making sure that we deliver buildings which operate at net zero. We see that as probably being the biggest breakthrough that we can make. That's where one of the most significant proportions of carbon is expended. But at the same time, we deliver the lowest possible embedded carbon. And from our perspective, we wanted to do that in a way that didn't, rack the bill up, but actually found a way of doing that at no extra cost. So it was a real, tough challenge to our team. As the whole carbon agenda has moved on, everybody has come a lot more aware as the full spectrum of where we expend carbon. We've grown that out ourselves. So teaming up with Construct Zero, we felt as a very natural step. Because if you look at the size of the challenge that we have as an industry, that we have as a country, and we have as a global population, it is only collective action that will get us there, and that's what we really liked about the Construct Zero approach. So I'm very quickly going to look at the priorities. The headline here is that for us, 7 of the 9 priorities are relevant, and we're focusing on those. I'm certainly not going to sit here and go through the detail of all of these, but what I thought it was helpful to do was perhaps just talk about where the priority is for us. So in reducing emissions, one of the things that we have, obviously being off-site, is that we have a lot less workforce involved in the delivery, which naturally reduces our footprint. So that's something that we're looking to continue to do, make our operations more efficient, and also move our fleet of vehicles and operations and site operations teams to more sustainable sources of energy. Using modern methods of construction, we already deliver most of our buildings between 75 and 90% of PMV, and that's really our focus here, is looking at what can we do day in, day out to move up that PMV, because we know the more that we can do in a controlled environment, the lower our footprint is, the more efficient we are. On low carbon heat solutions, our objective, and in fact we're already pretty much there, is to make sure that all of our buildings are now electric buildings using low carbon heat sources, and I'll talk a little bit more about an example of that in just a second. The energy performance of new and existing buildings, we see this as being probably the biggest area that as I say, we can help. We're now deploying smart technology in all of our buildings with the purpose of helping business owners and business users understand how their building is performing in operation, and how the use of the occupants is actually driving their carbon footprint. And I'll talk to an example on that in just a second. Implementing carbon measurements here on priority 7, and indeed designing out carbon on priority 8. For us, this has all been about implementing PAS 2080 and developing carbon calculation tools which really help us focus design and focus every step actually of the design and into implementation process to bring about that understanding of the cost of carbon, something which is very rarely spoken about. We all focus on time, cost and quality, but giving carbon the same amount of airtime to inform better decision making has become a real focus for us here. And then on priority 9, factory efficiency is really where we're going at here. So if we can improve our manufacturing and production, we know that we can have a significant impact there. So those are the priorities that are important to us, some of the things that we've been working on and why they're important. I just wanted to sort of bring that to life very quickly. Here's an example of a program which is called the NetCap Transit Accommodation Program, which we've been delivering for Landmark and the MOD. It's basically putting troops in new accommodation and overcoming many of the energy issues. In fact, that picture in the middle of the bottom, you can see the old accommodation, which is highly inefficient and not so desirable for our troops, with new low carbon technology. And so we focus very much on making sure that all of those buildings after the prototype have achieved A+ ratings. That's done with renewable sources of heat and energy. We've deployed technology here to understand how much hot water is being used, to understand, when heating's on, when windows are open, and to really use or to help our customer in that regard understand how to better use the buildings for zero carbon operation, because it's all very well achieving an EPC rating, but the real game here is in getting control of the unregulated power and the carbon footprint of that unregulated power. And now that we have that data, we're starting to go back on the design and look at how we can better optimize the heating solutions and indeed the use of sustainable energy using storage, taking whole camps off grid. So just a very quick example of how some of those priorities are being deployed in real life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. That's really interesting, and I think it will be really useful for others to see how you've worked out your priorities and that focus on operational performance for your clients as well, for the building users. So I guess, does that come under, when we talk about the different scopes, does that come under like sort of scope 3 when you're thinking about the ways that you look at emissions? I know that people talk about scopes 1 and 2 being slightly easier, talking about businesses and how they operate, but scope 3 being about how the buildings are actually used and clients and end users.
Yeah, I mean, scope 3 is a massive, as you know, a very broad area, and at some elements which are under our direct control. If we wanted to, I guess, say, look, the operational carbon is really the responsibility of the user. But actually, unless that thinking is built into the design, you're never going to impact it. So that's where we see it as being our responsibility. But in answer to your question, yes, it's part of the very broad church in that area.
Wonderful. Okay, look, thank you very much for that, Matt. And just a reminder to listeners, do post questions. Also a reminder that Matt's presentation and all the other presentations will be available on demand. So I know that we've had a couple of questions already saying, can people see these presentations later? Yes, you can. Right, so next up, we have Tom Hollingworth from J. Murphy & Sons. So Tom, over to you.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay, Chloe?
That's perfect. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to talk today. My name is Tom Hollingworth. I'm Head of Environmental Sustainability for J. Murphy & Sons. If you just move on to the first slide for us there, please, Ruth. So I thought it'd be interesting just to give you a quick introduction to who Murphy are, for those who aren't aware. So we're a large-scale infrastructure and construction company, engineering business, based over three key geographies for us, which are the UK, Ireland, and Canada. We were founded in 1951, and we now employ around 4,000 people across those geographies. Our 5 sort of key sectors that we operate in, and I'll move on to this in a little while about how they change, but the 5 key sectors we operate in are around transportation and decarbonising that railway industry, our power sector, distribution of water and operation of water assets. Energy transition for us is and for everyone I would imagine on this call is a large part of what we do, and then a construction and property sector that's predominantly based in the south of England for us. So as I said earlier, we're a family-owned business, and as part of that, it's almost part of our heritage. So we're committed to leaving a positive legacy in the communities and the environments that we work in. But also we're actively committed to educating the next generation on climate action, low carbon living, biodiversity issues, and we almost see that as a key part of what we do, so that they're not. It's less of a call for action for the next generation and more of an inherent way of life for them. So in terms of our own progress today, I thought it would be a little hypocritical to come on here and preach about about carbon reduction if I didn't tell you how we were doing. So we've actively reduced for the last 10 years, and it's part of a long journey for us. And we've most recently achieved around 36% emissions reduction as a business, and we've since set stretching targets to ramp up the amount of reduction that we're targeting. So we've set a target of 50% reduction over the next 5 years, which effectively triples the rate that we need to achieve emissions reduction for. We just move on to the next slide, please. So in terms of why we got involved in with Construct Zero, I mentioned earlier that the landscape that we operate in is changing, and I mean that in a physical sense in terms of the environment, of which the argument for change there is compelling and it's science-based. I probably don't need to go into the science behind that on this call. But the second part, well, the first part, sorry, of that is that it's not a choice for us. It's as a responsible business, it is an inherent part of the way that we do business. The second part of that is a commercial aspect, in that a sustainable business is also sound commercially. So for us, it's also good business sense, and the data is quite clear in terms of good environmental performance and good commercial performance, and that's something that we've worked quite hard on, of forging that link in our business and in our supply chain as well. So the first part of this is that it's a positive initiative that we can all take a step in the right direction, and that all companies can put themselves out for, and it's a statement of intent for us to be a business champion with Construct Zero. The second part is, we acknowledge that we may not know everything. And I think that's quite a healthy thing to say publicly. It's not. We're here to learn as much as anything else. And I suppose the Net Zero challenge is a time bound. We have a finite amount of time that we need to crack on and make some progress in. So for us, if we can collaborate more with other people and learn from them and help others out, then that's what it's all about for us. And the last part there, and I know we just touched on that in the previous session, the scale of the Net Zero challenge is unique, and it differs from most other business metrics that we look at. If you look at client satisfaction, or you look at safety stats or commercial performance, the Net Zero challenge is unique in that we can succeed as a business but fail as an industry. And that's, for us, being a sustainable business in an unsustainable marketplace that's not the goal for us at all. So what's clear is collaboration is key, and what's clear is that we need to work better together and talk more and engage more to see this as a collective goal rather than an individual goal. So it's much bigger than our own organizations. And the third point of that is that we're looking forward to collaborating more with other business champions and others that might be joining us on this journey. If you move on, please. So which of the Construct Zero priorities are important to our business? Probably a very similar answer to the previous one. I mean, I've been through the sectors there for you. All priorities underpin our core sectors and align with our values. So whether it's carbon measurement, whether it's zero emissions vehicles and plant on site, essentially the way that we see this going is that the environmental sustainability industry now underpins the entire sector that we work in, both now and in the future, and it will form the basis of many of our future opportunities. So just a couple of examples of the two that I picked there, just to focus on. Number 7, carbon measurement, something that we term conscious operations, and that's basically, whether it's good or bad, we basically need to measure accurately so that we know how to change it. Either way for us, and the challenge there for us, and the reason why we picked that was because it's in terms of getting that out in terms of our own emissions, it's relatively straightforward. In terms of getting that out, we have something like 12,000 supply chain partners. So in terms of trying to manage Scope 3 emissions on that sort of scale, it's a big challenge for us, and I'm sure it's a big challenge for other people on this call as well. In terms of zero emission vehicles and plant on site, we picked that because we honestly see that as a key part of our business. Over 90% of our operational emissions come from vehicles and plant on sites. So for us, targeting our single biggest emission source is a real, it's a challenge, but it's also a very exciting opportunity, and something that we've put a lot of research into is the use of alternative and sustainable, more renewable fuels on our projects. And we've recently committed to an additional £75 million investment over the next 5 years in that space. So yeah, that's something that we're excited about the future potential for. That's it from me, I think.
Thank you so much, Tom. Sorry, I'll just come back in there. There's so much there that I'm sure we'll come back to it in the Q&A, but I just want to, and in fact, I can see some questions coming in already for you. but I will save those. I just just had a quick question around, you made quite a lot of emphasis on collaboration, and I thought you said something really interesting there, which is you could succeed as a business but fail as an industry. And I think that goes to the heart of the net zero challenge and the reason for the business champions, I imagine. But in practice, how hard is it to change that mindset whereby, you know, good companies have been the competitive ones, have wanted to hold on to intellectual property? How do you get past that and actually genuinely collaborate and genuinely share information?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, isn't it? I think that it was probably seen as a key differentiator a few years ago, but I think that sort of ethos in the industry is you know, probably still remains in truth in some areas, but I think we're getting better at doing that. And I think until we start seeing it as a collective goal and an ambition that we all need to be driving forward towards, we won't make progress that we need to on the scale that we need to. So you know, in terms of how you do that specifically, well, it starts at design. We all pretty much know that at this stage. So it's about early engagement with that. For us, it's about early engagement with our clients and saying, well, here's how we could deliver a project for you. Here's, have you thought of doing this? It's getting in earlier so that we're not inheriting a carbon intensive project, you know, 2-3 years down the line once planning permission or a DCO has been obtained for that. So it's about early engagement for us. And the other part of that is taking supply chain partners, key supply chain partners along with you, and accepting that probably everyone's on a very different path and various different points on this journey, but it's engagement upstream and downstream for us that we've found has made a big difference in that space.
Great. Look, thanks, Tom. I can see questions are coming in. I would encourage more, but that's great. I can see your presentation has clearly sparked some ideas there. So we will now go on to Sarah Jolliffe at BAM UK. Sarah, are you able to join us? Let me just check who we've got here.
Yes, hopefully. There we go.
Ah, wonderful. We have you.
It works.
Over to you.
Great, thanks very much. Yeah, at the risk of being repetitive, I think there's a lot of themes that have come out in the previous two presentations that are very relevant to us, but I think I haven't got any slides, so you just get to listen to me talk and look at my lovely world map in the background of places that I haven't been but would like to. But yeah, so I'm the carbon reduction lead at BAM, and BAM is just one of the large tier 1 construction contractors and civils contractors in the UK, part of the wider Royal BAM group. And yeah, we get involved in everything with construction, of course, you know, everything from the large to small projects. And I think switching in, looking at the CLC's 9 priorities plan just looked like an obvious choice for us, you know, because it links to all of the things. So there isn't really, I think the question earlier around about the 1 to 9, which of the priorities are you aligning with? I think we're aligning to them all. Excuse me, but there's obviously a hierarchy to which are most effective. And so I think, as people have said before, yeah, there's to do with construction, of course, we want to get our own house in order. So we've obviously set the net zero targets that are coming through for the next few years, and that means swapping out, you know, the heavy impact, the liquid fuel use, for example, on construction sites. All of the stuff to do with how we move around, how we move goods and services around. So linking back to things like transport. And it's very much about the influence. So a key point, which I think I want to bring out what Tom mentioned as well, is the collaboration and things that there's a lot of different initiatives out right now that we could align with. But I think we've seen the Construct Zero, Construct Business Champions piece is probably one of the more leading examples, because it has that greater reach, the greater kudos, and we can bring everybody on the same page with that. I think for the detail, you'd probably be best if you've got the time to actually look at some of the Business Champion reports. It's all very well us presenting a short piece in this session, but they're well worth a read, those documents, because they obviously highlight a lot of the detail about what our organizations are doing, you know, the actual actions, so to speak. So, you know, that should help give a lot of ideas. And again, bringing up the kind of the carbon literacy is a big piece as well, because, you know, people can see what types of actions are being targeted using the data that we have available to us to make sure that we actually are impacting the right things and not going after, you know, small chicken feed actions potentially. I still hear people talk about changing LED lights, for example, in places. I mean, that should just be business as usual. That's not a proactive initiative for by and large. It has a very, very small impact, but we need to be getting rid of things like liquid fuels. We need to be decarbonising concrete, and certainly all of the embodied carbon that goes along with buildings and that kind of thing. So we definitely need to get our own house in order with regards to organisations. First and foremost, I think most are doing that. It's great to see the consistent approach. I think it's been said before, doing that is not a differentiator now. What is a differentiator and what is the IP for that is how organizations take best commercial advantage of those initiatives. That's very much within the gift of the companies, but in terms of actually doing it, that is a minimum standard. We're seeing this more and more from things like the PPN 0621 that came out this year regards to carbon reduction plans. There's various other schemes now which coming out from central government that mean we have to do things to a minimum level. So as I say, I think doing things in a low carbon sustainable way and having that ethos is a minimum standard, but the incentive to business is doing that in a smart way which optimizes the value. So we obviously invest in the right technologies and this sort of thing. So when it comes to the scope 3, again, I think it's been mentioned before, really, really challenging. It can be quite daunting, particularly for SMEs. We might approach people downstream in our supply chain. They've never been asked for this stuff before, and it's quite daunting to them. So we're obviously really keen to share a lot of learnings that we've had in trying to measure those things, so we again can focus on the big hitting items. We already know that concrete, steel, aggregates, asphalt, cladding systems, if we're talking about buildings, are of the biggest impacts right here and right now, what actually gets put into those structures. But also we mustn't forget about the energy in use component. And so this is where we can have a lot of influence. And I'm seeing this more and more, which is great. So a lot of what's going on in bringing industry around the table and bringing all like design partners and clients and contractors is we can have that dialogue and really build in low carbon and not expect to have to apply retrofit afterwards, particularly in the building space, of course, which has some of the heaviest impact. And so we're finding ourselves being asked a lot more, how can we deliver those types of things? And of course, we have a duty to make sure that we do that. So I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say for now, but obviously really welcome some questions on that. And over to the next speaker.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. Before you go, just that was very wide-ranging, and well done for doing it without slides as well. You've got it all in your head, which is impressive. Just on where BAM UK, have you got particular targets that you're setting yourselves as a organisation?
We have. There's what's been a little bit challenging, just speaking on the kind of BAM context, is we've had to create alignment, of course, with the European business and our parent company, but they're taking the lead from us. So that's again illustrative of the fact the UK is kind of leading on these things, particularly when it comes to around measurement and the types of initiatives, the types of policies that have come through. So I think we're at the forefront of that. We're going to be announcing some stuff across the group in February next year, which will cement net zero target, at least a high level, but then there'll be lots of sub actions underneath that with a lot of the framework. So obviously we can start to divulge a lot more of the detail at that point. But I mean, here and now, very obvious actions like electric vehicle transition, that's now a standard. Nobody in the business can get fossil fuel powered cars or even hybrids. I've poo-pooed hybrids for years. I think, why not take that step just to go full electric? You can do that these days. So that's those sort of things. Use of biofuels for plant and equipment, I think, has become quite a standard very rapidly. So we are doing action now to limit the absolute, I think, and the whole net zero piece is really about those kind of wider impacts.
Wonderful. Okay, well, look, it sounds like we should come back to you in February when you'll have some exciting announcements as well. So thanks for that, Sarah. Okay, right, so we'll go over to our last speaker now, Dave Fellows at Fork Truck Solutions. Dave, are you able to join us? Just need your webcam on.
Yeah, I'm just doing that now. There we go.
Wonderful, and I can see your screen. Over to you.
Right, thank you very much. Unlike Sarah, we've gone a bit slide mad, to be fair. So if you could just sort of click to the next slide for me. Basically, what we do, we're a company that specialise in lithium-powered forklift trucks, and as you can appreciate, as the UK becomes sort of a major economy or the first major economy to implement a net zero target, we understand that lithium has quite a large role to play in a sustainable future for businesses across the UK and obviously wider areas. In order to make sort of genuine progress towards a greener future, we believe it's our priority to provide sustainable solutions, and it also makes business sense with regards to costs and things like that. After quite a lot of years of innovation, lithium power, it's kind of at this moment in time the perfect source, and it will help people with regards moving towards I would say a greener future. It cuts down on the cost of fuel. It cuts down obviously on your carbon emissions as well. So being sort of fuel free, it's an ideal way for people to go, I do believe. If we go to the next slide. Basically, there are sort of three types of forklift truck out there at the moment that are using fossil fuel. You've got gas, diesel, and also lead acid. Lithium has come along over the last few years, and now it's been implemented into an awful lot of plant machinery, particularly forklift trucks. And there's reasons why you won't choose to use lead, diesel, or gas trucks again. The batteries against the lead acid have a longer lifespan, they're higher efficiency, higher density, they're sealed, so there's maintenance free, zero sulfuric acid, no battery topping required. Next slide, please. The company that we supply the trucks for, they've invested quite heavily in technology, and they're even producing things like automated guided vehicles now, which are all powered by lithium. So if you could just quickly move on to the next one for me. I've got quite a few here, apologies. Question down, what did lithium ever do for us? With regards to plant machinery, you can super fast charge lithium. There's reduced noise levels, less moving parts, no fuel costs, no fuel storage, no DPF cleaning, no battery topping. There's a whole number of benefits towards using lithium as opposed to fossil fuels in plant machinery. Next slide, please. We, as a company, we come across an awful lot of barriers against lithium, and sort of the barriers to change. These are the things that happen for us. Our yard is too rough. Our yard is too rough. Next slide, please. We don't have enough time to charge the battery. Next one again. Lithium power is unsafe. Can't use electric in the wet. Battery won't last. Too expensive. And we've always done it this way. Next slide, please. Basically, there are an awful lot of myths, and what we try to do is debunk those myths. We get them, people saying our yard is too rough. Our lithium-powered forklifts are specifically designed and built around a diesel chassis or a gas truck chassis. So basically what we've done is we've taken the diesel side of it out, the gas side of it out, and we've put lithium batteries in there. And it's made it a lot easier for people to use these trucks outside. One of the other things we get is there's no time to charge these. Because it's lithium power, you can super fast charge one of these trucks in literally under 2 hours. So there's no excuse for it. You've got people who you can charge these things up on lunchtime, on breaks, that kind of thing. One of the other main things that we get is lithium is unsafe. Tell that to Tesla. We use lithium ion chemistry, which is the most stable of all lithium options. In addition to this, the battery management system that cuts out charging if there's any overheating, and it manages the state of your battery. Next slide, please. You can't use lithium in the wet. Basically, all of our trucks actually come with an IP54 rated, and they're suitable for outdoor use. You can spray water on them from any direction. The other thing that we get is the battery won't last. We have a range of capacities to match applications for companies. So, you know, if you're using a forklift truck for a couple of hours, we've got a battery for it. If you want to use it for 8 hours or, you know, 24-hour shifts, we have a battery for it. The other side of things is people say that lithium power at the moment is too expensive. Not from ourselves, it's not. It's at the same kind of price point as a gas or a diesel truck, but without the fuel costs. The government themselves, obviously, they're investing quite heavily in carbon reduction, and they've offered companies a super tax deduction of 130% for them to be able to get involved in buying new plant machinery, getting rid of their old gas and diesel trucks, and investing in lithium technology. Next slide, please. As of April next year, I'm sure a lot of the bigger companies out there are fully aware of the red diesel ban, and it will only be an entitlement for certain companies or certain industries as of April. So basically what we're trying to do is push that to companies and make sure that they're trying to switch their trucks sooner rather than later. Next slide, please. A lot of companies are spending an absolute fortune on gas and diesel. Obviously, last few months have stated that there's an increase in gas prices, obviously an increase in fuel. We have fuel shortages a couple of months back as well. So basically, it's the perfect time for you to switch to a lithium forklift truck. Next slide, please. With the trucks, you've obviously got reduced maintenance and reduced maintenance costs. There are no oils, less moving parts, there's no engine cooling systems. There's a whole host of positive reasons why companies should switch to a better version of a forklift truck. Next slide, please. Basically, with regards to the carbon side of things, this is how much carbon you can actually take out of your business against a gas or diesel truck. Your average gas truck will produce 14.5 tons of carbon per year. That's based on a truck running 2,000 hours. A diesel, you're looking at 11.5 tons against the equivalent of a lithium, which is just over 1,000. A ton, should I say, a ton of carbon per year. Next slide, please. Basically, what we're trying to do and what we want companies to do is to reduce their carbon footprint. And this is it's a small step, but it's a step in reducing your actual carbon footprint. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dave. Really good to get a sort of a practical perspective on some equipment issues. Just while we're on this topic, we've had a couple of questions just come in just around how sustainable is lithium itself. Now that's something I don't know.
Well, it's a fair question. I mean, there are a few different types of lithium batteries out there. You've got obviously some of the lithium batteries contain cobalt and other chemicals. The ones that we actually supply don't contain that, so they're actually more sustainable with regards to the mining side of it. And the mining of the products that go into the battery. So out of all of the different types of, as a lithium ion, you see, so out of all the different types of batteries that are out there, ours are the most sustainable or sustainably made out of all of the batteries.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, I just thought I'd get that question in there while we were still focused on batteries. But now I'm going to invite the whole panel back to join us with their webcams, and we'll just break out for a few minutes just for a more generalized conversation, and I'll feed in some of the questions from our listeners, and whoever feels qualified to answer, jump on in. So hopefully we've got everyone back with us. That's great. Okay. So yes, thanks again for your presentations, and a reminder to listeners that if you missed any of that, the webinar will be available on demand. So please do come back to the website, and you will be able to find that you can get all of the information again. Okay, so we've had quite a lot of questions around Scope 3, as I thought we might. People identifying that that is the trickiest part of trying to reduce emissions. Maybe people could just jump in with their own observations about what their companies are trying to do to tackle the hardest challenge, which is, you know, often seen as slightly outside of your control. Does anyone want to speak to the Scope 3 challenge?
I mean, I can kick it off if you.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry, I
go.
saw Sarah's hand come up. Sorry.
Yeah, cheers for that. It's kind of, in Teams, you got like the raise hand thing. I think there is in Zoom as well, but no worries. I'm sure Matt will have a similar thought to this anyway, but just focus on the big ticket items. Spend a little bit of time. I know that's easy to say when you've got the resource to do it, and I'm not saying we have, even as a tier 1 contractor, to spend months actually just looking through what you deliver, the assets we build, and that sort of thing. But you do have to do that to some extent. Some of it's quite obvious. So this industry, quite renowned for using a hell of a lot of concrete, a hell of a lot of steel. So go for those sorts of things as well. And if it is something you're struggling with resource, then I'd definitely recommend going down the route of getting consultancy involved with that process. So that could be, for example, Carbon Trust do that service, or you've got the likes of Cundall, and there's various others. So I definitely recommend doing that. But you can make it a bigger thing than it is. It's very easy to do that when you see the chart of scope 1, 2, and 3, because it just says scope 3 is everything else. Just try and focus on those big hitting items.
And when you say bring in, there is an option of bringing in a consultant. Would that be for the purposes of actually collating the data, so understanding what you're actually looking at in the first place? Yeah,
absolutely. That is one of the biggest challenges, because what they bring is a set of metrics. So a piece of work we had undertaken in about 2016 across our whole group was with the Carbon Trust, and they actually were able to come to us with some pretty well developed economic input factors to actually try and generate that scope 3 number, and that just gives you a starting basis. Now, no one was saying that was particularly accurate or wherever it happens to be, but it helps you target the areas, whatever those numbers happen to be. So that's very useful to us.
Okay, and I'll just bring Matt in there. I think you wanted to talk to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big problems we have is that this is another example that points to the fragmentation that we have in our industry. And how poor buying behaviours can make that even worse. So I think, I completely agree with the point. Focus on the big stuff, but I think even at that level, we deal with a number of suppliers who are quite phased by it all, frankly. And as Sarah said before, haven't had to deal with this, and we therefore have an obligation as a buyer to set up arrangements in the right way. To give suppliers long-term visibility of workload that comes with a clear understanding that that needs to be with the condition of waste reduction, a clearer understanding of carbon footprint, and therefore we're able to exert our ability to influence the supply chain in a professional way. Taking that longer term view. The other view we take actually is to say, well, how much more of it can we integrate into our process, and therefore take our scope 3 indirectly into our own scope. So moving towards a more vertically integrated model that gives you better visibility, better control, and therefore the ability to make better decisions along the process.
That sounds really logical, but could you just give an example of how you can bring something in that maybe was outside of your scope?
Yes, if you look at just the way that we put our buildings together, we use our own direct workforce now, and take less of that away, or more of that away from the supply chain, bring that directly in. So it is down to components which we do not manufacture ourselves. So whether that's about the cladding, whether it's about the walls that we put up, we take more and more of that into our own scope.
Right. Okay. Does anyone else on the panel want to? We've had quite some sort of SMEs saying what support can they get, and how do they fit into it all? Does anyone else want to talk around the sort of supporting the supply chain? And I guess it's a wider sort of education and collaboration point. Does anyone else want to talk around how your company's got involved in that? Tom, can I go to you?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, just from our perspective, I made a couple of notes. The first thing that we're trying to do is to rank carbon intensivity. So for us, it is about not just trying to boil the ocean, if you like. It's about understanding which parts of the supply chain that we think are the most intensive, and that's where we'll focus. Is the first part of that. The second part is to understand that there's always going to be error. I mentioned earlier 12,000 supply chain partners, so there's always going to be a degree of error on that, and it's sometimes to go on things like financial spend or turnover when you're trying to apportion carbon emissions, from our experience of SMEs and smaller businesses, because if you imagine there you've got 12,000 variables that affect an ultimate calculation, an ultimate emissions total for your scope 3. For us, that's something that we've been looking at. And the third thing is about education and of that supply chain. So understand, not expecting too much is the first thing. Don't send questionnaires out with a million questions on what are you doing on scope 1, scope 2, scope. Confuses everybody. Don't expect too much and help them along the way. Is something that we've been trying to do particularly. So.
Okay, we're coming to the end, but I've got one more question, and actually it was directed at you, Tom, but I think it applies to everybody else. You know, what's your biggest challenge on net zero? I mean, I know we've covered scope 3, but is there anything else that you would highlight as the biggest thing that's kind of keeping you awake at night, scratching your head, working out how to solve it?
Me, sorry.
Yeah, the question was directed at you, but actually everyone can come in. But Tom, if you've got something to say, and then I can go to the rest of the panel as the last question.
For us, I know we talked earlier about it. It's around the reliance of our industry on fossil fuels is a huge thing. In terms of operational emissions, that's without doubt that we need to go. And then 3 is and how you bring them along on that journey for us.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Dave next. Biggest challenge for you, Dave?
Biggest challenges for us is literally to make people aware of what we actually do as a company, and just to educate people in what they can do to actually lower their carbon footprint, and to get them out of, you know, we've always done it this way mentality. And you know, I mean, I went to see a customer the other day who was the you know, one of the biggest sort of diesel users I've ever met. And, you know, you pitched him, I spoke to him about lithium forklift trucks, and he came back with, but we've always used diesel, you know. And you're speaking to somebody who's quite high up in a very large organization. We've always used diesel, but, you know, so why would you want to continue doing it? You know, change, you know, reduce your carbon footprint, save the planet, one forklift truck at a time.
Yeah, I guess that goes to the fact that it's quite a traditional industry, and some parts of it are quite averse to change. Matt, biggest challenge for you?
I think thinking carbon, you know, putting it right up there on the agenda with parity, with everything else that we think about in the design and build process. And yes, we probably don't understand enough about you know, whether lithium is the most sustainable technology. We have the same debates with timber and steel, and is there such a thing as net zero steel? But actually, if you start your teams thinking carbon at the same time as they're thinking, is this the most cost-efficient way of doing it? Is it the quickest way of doing it? Does it meet the employer's requirements? And you put that on the agenda, we will start to find out more, and we'll start to drive the change. I just don't think there's enough conversation about the cost of carbon.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, last word to you, and then I'll go to Stuart and his friend there.
Oh, look at that. Gorgeous.
Oh, it's great to have an expert. Sarah.
Expert. Yeah. I think it's unlocking barriers in risk and standards for me, because there's a lot of workshops I've been on with all of our key clients, which invariably are public sector conglomerates and government quangos and all of this. It does hit a wall where it's kind of like people aren't willing to accept the risk. We're very low margin generally in the industry. You know, we're very risk averse. We have to think about every last sort of biscuit and bean in the tin. So it's been quite difficult to unpick where the standards are. So take example, low temperature asphalt. There'd been quite, you know, the technology's there. We could do low temperature asphalt. We had them for years. It's not a new technology, but the standards have lagged on it, and the proof of its durability and stuff like this. You know, clients haven't yet been willing to actually take on en masse. We have had some wins with low carbon concrete this year, which I think has been obviously shared across other contractors, which is great. So there's been several thousand cubic meters of that, but they tend to be focused on the low risk stuff. So where it's just mass fill, doesn't require you know, that blocker to productivity and things like that, that we can actually start to leverage these things. So we've seen a bit more of it, but it needs to go faster. So that's the biggest challenge, is getting those standards up to date, and very much like Tom and Dave have mentioned about communication, and I do spend a lot of time trying to do things quite clever with that myself. Getting on camera, doing the talking heads, doing the engaging videos is not. I can't give a guidance document to the youth coming in now. I have an analyst who worked under me who's 20, and I run things past him. I say, what engages you? And we just go from there, really, and that seems to work quite well.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm going to give the last word to Stuart. I know we've had some people on the call saying they're SMEs or other companies that are slightly niche. How do they get involved in the Business Champions scheme? So over to you, Stuart, and your friend.
So it's all kicking off, and I've got 3 dogs in, and it's not going too well at the moment. So I'll try and get through this bark if I can help you. So I think, first of all, in terms of the greatest challenge for us on Construct Zero going forward, it's really about kind of maintaining the momentum and really kind of getting into much more penetration into the sector, because at the moment we're probably engaging with a lot of companies who want to engage with us. So really it's about kind of how do we reach out to the companies who might be a bit harder to reach on the ground. So I think that's going to be kind of quite a key issue for us going forward. In terms of kind of business champions, if you want to become a business champion, do drop me a line. I think you've got my email address there. Sorry, Chloe and Ruth have certainly got it. If you want to become a business champion, drop us a line. We are doing monthly commission, which Katrina manages. We're very happy to have more business champions on board, particularly SMEs. But I'm very much welcome more kind of continued engagement with you. And thankfully, I've managed to get through all that without a bark, so I'll consider that a success.
Well done. Well, look, I want to thank the whole panel. That was brilliant. We had some real detail there and some real insights into how to kind of try to meet this net zero challenge, which I think is at the forefront of everyone's minds, given that we've just had COP26. And I think there is a general feeling that businesses just have to get on now. They have to crack on and do what they know is right. So it's really brilliant to hear of some examples of you doing just that. Just a reminder to any listeners, if you've missed any bits of this, you can get it on demand. Also, this is just the first of many Net Zero Live webinars. So there are more running today and tomorrow on our website. So that's building.co.uk, building design, and our Housing Today website. You could go to any of those and you will find the details for Net Zero Live. And hopefully you can join us for more webinars. But thanks for now to our panel. Thanks to Dave, Matt, Tom, Sarah, Katrina and Stuart. And thanks for listening and goodbye.